Hello, welcome to the Old Testament study, or Torah study. Seeing as how it's Christian and a Jew. To Jews, it's Torah. So thanks for coming in. Today we are taking a little bit of a side trip, again for this time of year, to Purim, Esther, because it is. This will only be one video though, not many like last year. We go a little, we skim over it and go a little bit more in depth in areas and talk about a bunch of different things, somewhat as usual. So I hope you'll enjoy on with things. Catch you on the outro. Word there, and we are recording.
Well, hello, Rick. Welcome to my city amongst the clouds, Cloud City, as I like to call it. And we regularly make dumps of robot parts and people's severed hands. In case it's been dismembered by a lightsaber or something.
Yeah. Oh, so
Uh,
this
but
Cloud City is in conjunction with the one from Star Wars.
at this point, yeah. When we started, when you first came here, I was feeling very holy and very spiritual, and now I can't help but make Star Wars references. So I don't know what happened.
I don't know either.
All right, well,
Uh,
I'm going to get started.
uh,
So we're going to talk about Purim this week instead of going back to Genesis 1:5 because we got a lot of holidays in Judaism. I just have to talk about them sometimes because if I don't talk about them, then I don't know. You guys won't realize they're going on. That'd be a real
true,
shame for you, I think.
true. And of course, Purim
So this is
has.
so this tonight is called actually Erev Purim. It's the night before Purim, evening of Purim. So Erev Purim starts tonight at sundown, and it goes until Purim actually starts tomorrow at sundown. We have a fast from sun up to sundown. Tomorrow's the fast of Esther starts tomorrow,
Yeah,
um, and of course this is done in commemoration to the fast that Esther actually did. She had the Jewish people do in her time, as led by Mordecai.
yeah, yeah. Because
Um,
Purim has all to do with Esther. Well, God and
it's about
Esther, but
right.
from the
It's
book
about
of Esther.
Esther. It's about a lot of things. I don't know how far I should get into this for you, but I'll try. I'll start off. I'll tell you a little parallel. I'll tell you kind of where some of this stuff is coming from. Purim, on the one hand, of course, was a great crisis. It was a um, physical crisis, and whereas Hanukkah was a spiritual crisis.
Yeah,
The meaning is that the Greeks tried to prevent us from doing the things that made us Jewish. They tried to keep
yeah,
us from learning
yeah,
Torah. They try to do, uh, stop circumcising your children, don't teach them Torah.
yeah,
And so this was a spiritual crisis. And so then our response was to pick up swords and go to war.
yeah,
With Purim, it was a physical challenge, as a physical threat to the Jewish people, and our response was prayer.
yeah.
And that's ultimately kind of a guide for how we deal with situations. If it's a physical crisis, you pray. If it's a spiritual crisis, you get up and you pick up your sword if you have to, or
Although with Purim,
not a sword.
Purim, eventually it came to the sword, picking up the sword, at least defending yourself, if not more. But
Right. Well,
and that's
sure.
sort of interesting. I find, well, thinking about it just now, those are the two holidays I don't believe are, well, obviously, Esther's story is recorded, but those are the two celebrations, Hanukkah and Purim, that aren't in like Deuteronomy, Leviticus, wherever it says all the festivals that you
Yeah.
guys are supposed to have. I
They're,
forget
they're
what's
not
in
the
what
Torah.
book. Yeah,
Right. They're not the Torah. Right. These
yeah,
are non-Torah holidays, and
uh,
they are the two that were. These are the two rabbinic holidays established by the rabbis. Purim was established by the men of the Great Assembly of the Jewish people in the Sanhedrin, and Hanukkah eventually is as well. And Purim was, I mean, Purim and Hanukkah have a lot, uh, satisfy different problems. there are a lot of parallels between what happened in the time of Esther and Purim and what happened to the Jews in the time of Hitler.
Mm-hmm.
And there are during the Nazi Germany, and there are a lot of interesting parallels between Hitler and Haman, between his generals and, the 10 sons. And
Yeah.
so there are a lot of very interesting things. It was a similar case. It was an attempt to wipe out the Jews physically, to
Yeah.
kill as many Jews as you could, and eventually Hashem overthrew Haman. Haman was killed. Hitler was killed.
Yeah.
So, but the story of Purim goes back to the time of King David. This is where the roots of Purim are, because
Mm-hmm.
in that time there was the first king of Israel who was
King Saul.
King. Oh, nice! You didn't fall for it. Most people go King David. No good. King Saul. That's right. The Benjamite, right? He's from the tribe of Benjamin
Yeah.
or Benjamin,
Uh,
and so I can see you're very pleased with yourself. That's
I'm just like, I'm not gonna get tricked that easily. Come on, this is I'm caught enough of my Old Testament, you know.
so you have King Saul, who's the first king of Israel, the tribes,
Yeah.
and he has a very particular experience that happens that causes him to lose the kingdom. Do you remember what that is?
Um, it's probably not the one I'm thinking of, but I'm gonna say when he went to the Witch of Endor.
That was after. This is actually after that.
Okay.
Because why did he go to the Witch of Endor?
Well, to who was it? Elijah? No, not Elijah. Elisha. Samuel. Samuel,
That's
the
right.
prophet.
He
He
went back
he
to, he
tried to
went,
contact one of the the prophet.
and he apparently he succeeded. He talked to Samuel through the witch. So
Yeah.
okay, so but this incident actually happens when Samuel's still alive. There's a
Mm.
big event that happens while Samuel's still alive, and it
Uh,
has a huge implication. Do you remember what that is?
the one where he was supposed to slay a king and all his people or whatever, and he did not slay the king. He took him prisoner.
He took him prisoner, and he saved the best cattle and
Uh,
everything. Now,
yeah.
do you know that king's name is?
I know you've told me, and I should know. I think it starts with an A.
You're correct. It's Agag. It's Agag, King Agag, and
All
King
those Hebrew
Agag.
names are hard for me.
Well, I know. Well,
uh,
that's not really a
uh,
Hebrew name. That's an Amalekite name because
okay.
Agag was the son of Amalek.
Yeah.
So
Okay. All the names
um,
over the Middle East, we'll say, are hard.
that's right. I hear.
At least as an English speaking person who's not really involved in the culture. So when I come across those names in the Old Testament or New Testament, it's like blah 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 blah.
Right. And
And I'm not
Zerto
meaning,
Frog
and I'm
went
not
out and
meaning no
he said,
disrespect.
"Surely there are birds here, and surely I shall feed them." No. So so Agag was a descendant of Amalek, and
Mm-hmm.
there is something that we are told to do in the Torah. You know what that is?
Oh, there's lots
I
of
know.
things I
I'm
don't
asking. I,
know.
I'm putting you on the spot. I know this is very unfair of you. You were not prepped beforehand, but I want you to know you're doing very well.
There's lots of things you're told to do in the Torah and not do.
Well,
uh,
related to Amalek.
uh, mm, no, it's probably not worship other gods, although that's one. What was the question again?
There is a Torah commandment regarding Amalek. There is a commandment in the Torah about something regarding Amalek.
Oh, Amalek was specifically. Hmm. This one I honestly can say I probably should know. I probably do know, but I can't think of it off the top of my head.
That's okay. That's okay. I know. I know. I'm putting you on the spot. So, we are commanded to wipe out the remembrance of Amalek
Oh, okay.
and not to forget it. So
Okay.
we're both commanded to wipe out his remembrance and not to forget about wiping out his remembrance, right? So there are two commandments there, right?
um, he went a dead away.
Yeah. So at this time, Agag is the last remembrance of his people are the last of Amalek, and
You said
Shaul was
Agog.
supposed to fulfill Agag.
Okay.
He was like he and his people were the last of Amalek, and he was supposed to kill them. But what happened? It's a Torah commandment: wipe out Amalek,
Yeah.
kill Amalek. Right?
Yeah.
He doesn't do it. So what happens is that it turns out that he's able, through one means or another, to have a child,
Yeah.
and his line is continued on until the days of Haman Hagagi,
Yeah.
Haman the Agagite. He's the descendant of Agag.
Hanum or
Haman is,
Hamum. Hamum.
I don't
Trying
know
to
how you
think of
say
the
it,
guy.
Haman.
I'm trying to think how
Haman?
the guy's name.
Haman? No,
Haman
that's
for
how we say it. I don't know, Haman.
Haman. Okay.
But however you say it, I don't know. But
I don't have
so
it in front
Haman,
of me, so I'm not 100% sure. I'm trying to go by
that's
memory.
okay. So Haman, so it turns out that Haman is the descendant of Agag. Amalek has carried on to the time of Esther. And do you happen to know who is the male protagonist in the story of Esther?
That would be her uncle, I believe. It starts with M. What's his name? I know his name, but I can't.
Yeah, it's okay. I'm forcing you
Uh,
to
oh no,
blank your
no.
memory and ask your question.
Uh, getting
Mordecai.
Mordecai. Yeah,
Mordecai, how you
I
Yehudi.
knew it started with
Mordecai
an
the Jew.
M.
That's good. You know, the first step, knowing somebody's. It's what is it? Samsonite. No, that's wrong. That was Dumb and Dumber. That was one of the best lines ever. Was what is her name? Simpson, Sarah, Samsonite. You know, I always like that. Anyway, so so do you know what tribe Mordecai's from?
I'm gonna say Joshua, or not Jo- Joseph. What are the tribes?
That's
The
okay.
tribe of Joseph. There's a tribe of Joseph, right? You know.
Well, there are two tribes. There's the two tribes of Joseph. There's the half tribe of Manasseh
Uh,
and Ephraim. Although
yeah.
sometimes it's counted as Joseph, as one, sometimes they're counted together, sometimes it's counted separately. But no, it's not Joseph. Mordecai is actually from the tribe of Benjamin.
Oh,
Benjamin. And who else comes from the tribe of Benjamin?
King Saul.
King Saul. So now we've got a descendant of King Saul versus a descendant of King Agag. And this is the
Uh-huh.
backdrop
And,
of the story of Esther.
and that I guess would also make Esther uh, part of the tribe of Benjamin too.
Mm-hmm. So I believe so.
Yeah.
Um,
And that was the
I mean,
last of the
not necessarily, but
brother.
yeah, she could
That
be.
was the youngest of all the brothers too. From
He was. He was the youngest, and he was the smallest tribe.
yeah.
Um, so there was something that happened, and I'm not going to make you. I'm not going to make you guess or answer this question. But during the battle, when he defeated Agag, he was supposed to wipe out all the spoils of Agag. He was supposed to
Yeah.
kill all the cattle, all the burn all the idols, get rid of everything, right? But he didn't do
Burn it
that,
to the ground.
right? So we have this idea of making a tikkun. A tikkun means a repair of a situation. The time of Esther was when we made a repair in the mistake that King Shaul made at that time. So when it became possible for us to, um, when it became possible for us to actually have spoils. This time, God didn't say you couldn't have the spoils. The king said you can take the spoils. The Jews refused to have the spoils this time.
Yeah.
So this time, and the reason we did that was because
Yes.
this was making a tikkun. We were making a repair of the mistake that King Shaul said. So that's the story. That's sort of like the parallels and kind of the core of the story of Esther. Now, I want to talk about sort of the historical context of all this that we know about. Because there are problems, Rick. Can you believe that? There are problems? There are
Problems.
problems with.
Oh, go figure problems. I wouldn't think there'd be problems. Oh, one sec. There's always problems. We're always having issues.
There are issues. And if you have an issue,
And,
here's this issue.
and it's always good to have issues because then you have to solve them and then people can buy them.
They can
Especially
buy
if
the
you,
issues.
yeah, if you're comic people, you want
Oh,
people.
that went over my head. Good job. That was a nice pun. I like that. Worthy, Rick, of a dad joke. I will tell you. So
And
here's
there's
what
my mom.
I'll tell you. Hello, how are you?
He says hi.
So when we go to, we have a problem, and that is, according to the Jewish people, the Second Temple lasted for 420 years.
Uh,
That means from the time it was reestablished to the destruction of the Second Temple was 420 years. But according to secular scholars, it stood for something like 589 years. So it's about a 169-year difference. So
yeah.
according to secular historians, the Second Temple period lasted 169 years more than the Jewish accounting. Now we have in our accounting, of course, we have the Tanakh. But we also have a document which has been the traditional Jewish accounting of time called the Seder HaOlam. The
Mm-hmm.
Seder HaOlam was, I guess you could say, first published or compiled in around the second century CE during what's called the Mishneh period. That's the period we talked about the formation of the Talmud. If you remember back then, you have the
S-
Mishneh period.
just briefly, I
It's a
remember.
long time ago. It's a long time ago, right?
Yeah.
So it's the same time. If you want to say get just for a reference, it's this Mishneh period is the same time period as Jesus, basically, because
Yeah.
that is because that 200-year period there, that's the Mishneh era. Um, so the first
And
couple
what does
centuries.
Mishnaic, I think you said? What does that mean? The
It's
word?
it's referring to the compilation of the Mishnah, which is the oral tradition that we've had since Mount Sinai.
Oh.
So the Mishnah contains the oral transmissions from Mount Sinai, as well as some of the decisions and understandings of the various judges and whatnot of the Jewish people. So it's a very authoritative document, and it's what we used to create the Talmud.
Mm-hmm.
The six orders of the Mishnah make the Talmud, which is about 63 volumes of legal work. It's a legal document. It talks about
Yes.
it's like oral law basically.
Yeah.
So so this period of time, why was I going on about the? The Seder Halam is produced at this time, although the tradition goes back all the way to Moses.
Mm-hmm.
So we've been keeping track of our time ever since then. If you notice, Judaism is a very much obsessed with time. We
Yeah.
have Shabbat once a
I
week.
think
We have
everybody's obsessed with time.
right, but I mean, our whole religion is kind of like based around time. Like it's like we've got holidays once a week, we got holidays once a month, we got holidays once a year, holidays once every 28 years. We got, I mean, every one of our mitzvot, like or holidays, is about time and keeping in mind certain things that happened during that time.
No.
So I say all that just to set the groundwork that I think that we have a better idea of what happened in our history than secular historians do. However,
Well, yeah, especially
there
people
is
today can't. No, it's just a question of anybody that wrote down stuff from back then who wasn't, I would say, but that's going off on some other tangent.
well, there's a lot that can be said there.
Yeah.
This is a book that I highly recommend. It's called The Challenge of Jewish History, written
Uh-huh.
by Alexander Houle, and it discusses this missing 168 years between the secular and the Jewish calendar. And
Uh-huh.
he addresses that. We're not going to go through this book tonight. I'm just going to give you kind of like the key points, some important things to consider.
Uh-huh.
So uh, so the thing is that the entirety of the Jewish period of the Second
Mm-hmm.
Temple period, the part of the reason they draw the conclusion that there's this that it's longer than it is because we have a couple of things on it. Ahasuerus, um, Artaxerxes, is that how you call him in the story of Esther? What do you call him in the story of Esther?
Who?
Ahasuerus, the king of Persia. What do you,
I have uh one of the names you said there. Which?
Artaxerxes?
No, I don't think.
Ahasuerus is what we call him Ahasuerus.
I'm not sure what we call call them.
Oh,
It's
okay.
been a while since I've read the story of Esther. Like about a year.
Well, that's the last time I read it as well, so about a year ago. Uh, but okay, so we call him Ahasuerus. Ahasuerus is the son of who we call Darius the Great, right? Or Darius one. Um, Most people think that the fall of Persia happened in the time of Darius the Third. That Alexander the Great defeated Darius the Third and brought the Persian Empire into the annals of time. It was no more. The argument Alexander Hull makes here, I call him Anthony. It's Alexander. Alexander Hull makes is that he understands that it was more likely that the Darius that Alexander defeated was Darius the Great, Darius the First, and that is the father of Ahasuerus, who, according to the Cyrus cylinder, it seems to be someone known as Cambyses.
No.
The silent. Go ahead.
I'm not sure whether you said it. My mind got distracted. But is this Darius the Great the one that would have been with Daniel? Because didn't Daniel wasn't he
There was a
part of?
Darius, right? Right. I believe so. So Daniel was under Nebuchadnezzar,
Yeah, and
and he actually, according
then
to Jewish
wasn't.
tradition, he's actually part of the story of Esther as well.
Yeah, because you mentioned that about I think the three Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego about them
Right,
last
right,
year in the story there somewhere.
right.
I forget
So
exactly where.
Daniel, Daniel was Esther's the guy who kind of ran errands for her. Was the person running the messages and everything between Esther and Mordecai. He was her attendant,
Yeah,
basically.
is what you believe that he was her attendant, Esther's attendant, Daniel, possibly.
Right. So let me go back on it. I'm trying to keep this straight because this can get very confusing for people if I'm not straight on this. Okay.
Yeah,
So
sorry if I'm threw you off with that question, because I just suddenly
no, it's
remembered
okay.
Darius, and with I remembered a Darius, or I was pretty sure with Daniel.
You've got to read. You got to read Ezra, Daniel, and Nehemiah. Those are the three big ones. Also, you have to read the book of Jeremiah
Yeah,
because that all deals with a lot of these important timeline issues
yeah.
are discussed in those. So Ezra begins. Let's see here. Let me get my Tanakh over here. I got Ezra. Ezra begins in the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, and we can actually call his name Koresh. Right? That's how you say his name in Hebrew is
Okay,
Koresh.
Koresh.
Mm-hmm. Upon the conclusion of Hashem's prophecy by the mouth of Jeremiah, and that's talking about the conclusion of that prophecy is referring to the prophecy of the destruction of the first temple.
Yeah, the 70 years that they were supposed to be exiled, if I remember right.
Right, 70 years, right. Hashem aroused the spirit of Cyrus, king of Persia, and he issued a proclamation throughout his kingdom and in writing as well, saying, "Thus said Cyrus, king of Persia, all the kingdoms of the earth uh, has Hashem, God, uh, yeah, has given to me, and he has commanded me to build him a temple in Jerusalem, which is in Judah. Whoever is among you of his entire people, may his God be with him, and let him go up to Jerusalem, which is in Judah, and build the temple of Hashem, the God of Israel. He is the God which is in Jerusalem. And whoever remains in whatever place he dwells, let the inhabitants of that place bestow upon him gifts of silver and gold and valuables and of animals, together with the contribution of the temple and of God which is in Jerusalem." So that's what it says there in the first chapter of Ezra.
Yeah, and then of course no, 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 no.
Uh,
Nehemiah built the wall, or
right.
had the wall
Now listen
built.
to this though. I want you. This is from the Cyrus
Yeah,
cylinder. This is
yeah,
an independent document. This is something that was written by the Persians, and
yeah.
I want you to see if you notice anything. The Cyrus cylinder says, "Marduk, the great Lord, rejoiced at my good deeds, and he pronounced a sweet blessing over me, Cyrus the king, who fears him, and over Cambyses, the son of my issue, and over my all my troops, that we might proceed further at his exalted command. All kings who sit on thrones from every quarter, from the upper sea to the lower sea, those who inhabit the remote thrones from every quarter, or said that inhabit remote districts, and the kings of the land of Amaru, who live in tents, all of them, brought their weighty tribute into Shuana and kissed my feet. From Shuana I sent back to their places, to the city of Ashur and Susa Akkad, the land of Eshnunah, the city of Zamban, the city of Metunah, Dir, as far as the border of the land of Kutu, the sanctuaries across the river Tigris, whose shrines had earlier become dilapidated, the gods who lived therein, and made permanent sanctuaries for them. I collected together all their people and returned them to their settlements. So, did you notice anything between what I read in Ezra and what I read here?
It sounded like there might be some similarities. Just
So, the Cyrus cylinder is saying something similar to Ezra, the beginning of Ezra, but it's making it more of all of his people, right? He's
yeah,
sending everybody back. So, what happened was during the First Temple period, the Syrians took different peoples and they moved them into different areas, and there was this swapping that happened. So the Jews were moved up north and scattered around, and then the Samaritans who you have in Jerusalem, they're brought down and they actually are ensconced in Israel, and so these are the Samaritans. You know, you heard from the story right there. So
yeah,
this caused a huge crisis when or issue when the Jews came back. Was the Samaritans had a kind of conversion to Judaism, but it wasn't clear that it was, you know, a true conversion or not. There's a debate about it. But
yeah.
anyway, so
I've
so
heard
what
about the
happened was
differencing.
right. So what happened was that the Assyrians came and took people and they moved them around. And the reason they moved people from their land and put them in new lands and switched these populations around was he wanted to kill the nationalism. He wanted to kill the love for your hometown. He wanted to kill the idea that we need to overthrow the ruler so we can go back to the way things were. And by the way he did that was he moved the populations, he transferred the populations to new lands, and there they were forced to deal with living in a completely new land. There was nothing to take back. This wasn't their land to begin with. But nobody was happy with this arrangement. And King Cyrus went ahead and he sent everybody can go home. Everybody can go back to your original uh, settlement. But here's the problem. Ezra chapter 1, when this happens,
Yeah,
right? Darius the Mede, or Darius, I guess the Great, Darius the Mede here, and then he has his son Cambyses, who we know as Ahasuerus. Uh, if Ahasuerus is his son and his son doesn't have power yet, that means that what's going on in Ezra happens before the story of Esther.
Mm.
So that's a little confusing because it sounds like everybody's gone home and everybody's happy, right? But
Eh,
that's actually not that's not what has happened. Uh,
hey, it takes
and I
time to
want to
go
say,
home, and then maybe not everybody wanted to go home. Maybe Mordecai or whatever, something happened to obviously Esther's parents, so she stayed with Mordecai, who was staying not decided not to go back because he was an official, wasn't he? Would have he been
yeah,
allowed to go back?
right. So I believe it's actually I believe in Ezra, I think around 5. He actually talks about, just to let you know, I went to a great study last week and we studied some of the stuff together. It's funny we have the couple that my daughter folds their laundry. They're actually they're a couple who perform music. And they're kind of fairly well known here in Israel. Like they're pretty good, pretty popular group. But the husband is doing he's doing a study on Ezra and Nehemiah, and so I went last week and I said I got a lot of interesting information from him. So I'm
Cool.
sharing a lot of this stuff. So I have to give him the credit because not all of this research is from me. It's a lot of stuff that he said. But
Yeah.
yes, you are completely right about the fact that um, that Mordecai during this group is actually he comes back to Israel. Okay, so the problem is that something happens where he goes back to Persia,
Yeah.
right? He goes back there.
Okay.
So what happens, right? So it turns out that it was the challenges you saw in Nehemiah, the book of Nehemiah, the book of Nehemiah, right? There's that whole issue where they offer to send back each side who's quarreling. They're going to send people back to fight it out with the king, with
Yeah.
King Cyrus. Well, the Jews chose Mordecai to go back and represent them, but
Mm.
the other side chose someone named Haman, and Haman went back, and so that's why Haman and Mordecai are actually there.
Yeah.
Okay, going head to head with one another. This is part of our oral tradition. It's not just in the text; it's also part of the oral tradition.
Hmm.
So Haman and Mordecai are there. That's why this whole fight between them, it doesn't just come out of nowhere. It's not like sometimes if you read it, you get the idea that Haman just looked at Mordecai one day and went, "You are a jerk. I just do not like you." Right?
Well,
That's not what happened. They were already fighting with each other. Right? They're already
yeah.
fighting with each other.
Well, the one thing I'd take away too is, well, Haman, he wants power, and Mordecai is standing in the way of him getting power. So, you know,
Well, no, I mean, Haman already had power. He already had power. Like he had more power than Mordecai. But he couldn't stand the fact that Mordecai, Mordecai still was like, "I'm not bound to you." Oh, here's a
yeah,
story. You want an interesting
yeah,
story about Haman and Haman and Mordecai. Um, so this is oral tradition. So
yeah,
on their journey back to Persia, Mordecai took with himself a lot of supplies. It was a tough journey. He wanted to make sure he was prepared. He had food and water and everything.
yeah,
Haman, for whatever reason, didn't. And along the way, Haman started begging Mordecai for food. And Mordecai said, "I'll give you food, but you have to sell yourself to me as a slave." And he goes, "Fine, I'll be your slave," right? And Mordecai says, "What, you think I believe that you're just going to be my slave just because you say it?" I said, we need a contract." And he goes, "But the problem is that I don't have anything to make a contract on." So Haman says, "Look, you have a sandal. Why don't we write it on your sandal?" So so Mordecai takes his sandal off, and they write up this thing. Haman, will now be from this day forth Mordecai's slave. So what happened was that whenever Haman went out there feeling uppity, feeling wanted to show off and everything like that, Mordecai would just stick out his foot and show them the bottom of his shoe that said on it, "I Haman am Mordecai's slave." So that's part of the idea of why he's so ticked off with Mordecai. There's a lot of stuff going on there.
Yeah.
They were enemies beforehand. They're enemies on the way. They're enemies,
Yeah.
once they
A
get
lot
there.
of stuff in the oral tradition that we don't necessarily get in the written
Right.
there between
Well,
Mordecai and
there's a lot of
Haman.
right, and that's because the texts are pretty conservative. Like you don't need all those details. They make things interesting, but they're not necessarily
Yeah.
you know.
As Scotty said in Star Trek, you got to be conservative on paper.
That's right. I like that. Well, it's just the thing is that if you wrote down all like the oral tradition and everything that you were supposed to do, that you'd have volumes of books,
Yeah.
And how do you like one of the part of our oral tradition is how to slaughter an animal correctly. How do you put that into a book? I mean, you can talk about it, you can describe it to a certain extent, but you can't completely write it out. It requires someone to show you how to do it correctly.
Yeah, or
In fact, it says,
diagrams.
well, no, even diagrams are sufficient. And besides that, Hashem says himself, he says, you will slaughter the animals after the manner that I've shown you,
Yeah.
not after the manner of the way I wrote, right?
Yeah.
Um, so there is that need there for an oral tradition in order to be able to perform some of the laws.
Yeah.
But anyway, so this kind of gets us far afield, I guess, a little bit from where we were starting off at.
Which is normal for us.
It's very normal. Say bye to your mom for me.
Halal says bye.
Bye, but I'm going out to see if I can pick up the channel.
We're not live on any channel at the moment. Well, at least I'm not live.
No, I'm not live either.
But I am recording it, Mother, and it's
Yeah,
going to be
well,
going
that
up on
doesn't
my
give me-
channel in a
It doesn't
couple.
give me a chance to ask a couple of stupid questions.
Okay, you can
Oh,
ask
yeah,
your.
if she's got questions, yeah, ask questions. Yes, please.
But one, where can I get a hold of a Jewish calendar cheap? And two, maybe shofar.
Well, so far you can get in calendar, you can get both in a Judaica store. I don't know if you live near. Do you live near a Jewish community?
I don't know. I'm sure there's got to be one or two in Hamilton. He was saying, get one. You probably get them at a Jewish store, or is that how you
It's called
describe
Judaica. It's called a Judaica store.
a,
Judaica.
a Judaica store? He spelt that. You'll be able to hear it when I do this, or you can listen to after. So,
And the second thing to get a Jewish calendar cheap, if you live near a Jewish community, they'll give them away sometimes at different places.
okay.
Uh,
The first was for the shofar. He's saying if we live near a Jewish community, most likely you can just get one for free by them. Probably if you go to
a calendar,
a calendar.
not a calendar,
A
not a
calendar.
shofar. Shofar you have to pay
Yeah.
for; they're expensive.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
And that's
shofar
all
is
he
expensive.
knows so far. But probably if you went to a synagogue and asked for a calendar, they might have one.
I don't even know where
They
the
might. Or
synagogues
you can
are.
also get it online. You can also find it online too.
Yeah.
And I can find
Yeah,
out.
you could probably order a Jewish calendar from Amazon.
Oh yeah, they're not hard to get. I mean, there's also online. You can go online.
Yeah.
Hey, tell your mom that your uppityness is because she didn't spank you enough when you were a kid. Are you not gonna tell her that? You're not gonna tell her that?
Well, she can hear later if she listens.
Oh, she wants to know now. Look at her. She's very curious. What did he say? What did he say? Go tell her.
Yeah. Not gonna tell you. You can listen when it goes on air. Since I'm not probably gonna edit this much, I'll just do my little intro, my little outro.
Okay. So anyway, so
Sorry, I'm
this is so
interested
all
in
this
what's
stuff.
going on.
We'll forgive you. Okay, so maybe we can get back to
Yeah.
whatever what else trying to say.
I'm just kind of like just saying stuff. Don't worry about me. I've just got words and things that I'm saying.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, the thing is, with me having the headphones, you can't hear anything you're saying. So it's like,
Right, right.
and then I'm just doing that so there's no feedback or whatever. You know how
Sure.
these things work.
Hmm.
You
I
know,
do. I understand completely.
and yeah, I get that she wants to be involved or listen or whatever, maybe ask questions. But it's bad enough with all the rabbit trails I take you on. Two people?
I don't know. I don't know.
And here we are on a rabbit trail about rabbit
I
trails.
know. Well, that's all you. That's all you. That's all I can
Yeah.
say.
Okay. Anyways,
So
I'll shut up.
anyway, the second solution Hoole comes to as far as the problem of 169 years. First off, the first one of the big problems is that um, the Persian king list lists about 10 kings, but we know that but in the Tanakh they list about 4 kings, so that's a problem.
Yeah.
Uh, and of course, the Jewish answer is that we only focus on the kings that were relevant to us as part of Jewish history. So
Yeah.
the Median Persian kings that were relevant to us, those are the ones that we mentioned. There are kings before, there are kings are after. That's just like when it comes to Egypt, right?
Yeah.
There's Pharaoh. I can't say him. I can't make up my mind which way I'm trying to say it. The English way or the Jewish way. Pharaoh. There are pharaohs before the Exodus. There are pharaohs after the Exodus.
Yeah.
We only talk, excuse me, about the pharaoh when it's relevant to the Jewish people,
Yeah.
and
Like
so that's the
uh
same way over here.
like when probably Abraham visited there, and then obviously when you know the Jewish people wanted to get released. Oh, probably the Pharaoh for when Joseph was there and became
Yeah.
second in command. And there's probably a
Hmm.
couple other times that are relevant that I can't think of.
In the in the Tanakh, there's like Pharaoh Necho, and there are others that are mentioned there. Um, but so this is I think, a pretty reasonable response. But it doesn't really address the big problem of the 169 years. And so Bull takes care of a lot of that by suggesting that the victors in the Persia versus Greek war were the Greeks, and the Greeks may have led everyone to believe that Persia was done as a superpower, and that Greece was it. But we know that's just not true. I mean, if America, for example, were to lose its place as the number one superpower in the world, that would mean that necessarily America would no longer be a powerful nation. It would
Yeah,
just mean that maybe they were the most powerful nation.
yeah.
And I think
Just
that's
because they
more
go
or less
from
what
one
happened.
to three doesn't mean they're still not a powerful nation.
Because number 14 is still scared of America, right? So
Yeah,
number 14 is going, I don't want to mess with America. So the idea is that they say history is written by the winners, and that maybe that the Persian history, that instead of there being like Persian history stopped Alexander the Great, killed Great Darius III, and now Persian history or that those kings are done, and now it's Greek history. That maybe actually there was more of an overlap that took place,
yeah,
and that's the suggestion that Alexander Hoole makes. He makes that in his book.
yeah,
It's a really great book, but I'll tell you, when you read it, you need to sit down with pencil and paper and just kind of follow what he's saying.
yeah,
He lists out his comments. I feel like he still mans the argument. I feel like he doesn't pull any punches, and he addresses the big questions pretty well.
yeah.
And there's another book that I want to suggest for anybody who's interested in history, and that is called Codex Judaica. Codex, Codex Judaica, called the Chronological Index of Jewish History. This
Okay.
goes up through, I think, 2014. The one I have,
Yeah.
and it has timelines and charts, maps, and all that.
Yeah.
But it starts with Adam and moves forward in history to the modern time, and it's based on the Seder HaOlam that I talked about earlier.
Uh, and those probably
Seder
both
HaOlam,
be
and then
available on Amazon, eh? Both those books.
oh sure, yeah, you can find it. I don't know how cheap they are,
Yeah,
but
I'm not saying how
it's
cheap
pretty
they'd be. I'm
fantastic.
just saying you might be able to find them there.
Yeah, I think you can. I think you for sure can. So I guess I don't want to go too much further because one, I'm getting tired, and two, I got to fast only tomorrow. But I think this is kind of a basic introduction. I feel like every year we're getting a little bit more into what happened
Yeah,
during the Purim time.
yeah,
Like we talked about it last year, and I gave you some information, and this year I've
yeah,
downloaded a bunch of information on
yeah,
top of you.
yeah.
Um,
Last year we did it well for 3 to 4 weeks in a row. We went through the whole scripture, your whole pamphlet,
I,
and all that. Was it all 10 chapters, 8 chapters?
yeah, something like
I
that.
get it might be different for you than for me. Depends on how did I know we uh divide it, the Old Testament, well, what I call the Old Testament, up a little differently than you, as we've talked about, so it goes to
Sure.
imagine that we might divide up chapter and verse a little differently too.
Oh yeah, well for sure. I mean, it happens with the Psalms, for example. Uh, um, yeah, 10 chapters of Esther. For example, the Psalms. I believe that you guys use it with the first line. You don't count it as a verse. You count it as more like a title or something. Whereas we count the very first verse of every psalm as the first verse.
Yeah,
Um, I mean, all this stuff was made up arbitrarily. So they're all arbitrary divisions,
yeah.
and sometimes it makes it difficult to understand what's going on because you think, oh,
Be,
there's a good reason for this stop, but maybe there isn't.
yeah, because as we know, none of this stuff was written with chapters and verses, when it was
Right.
originally written, you know.
It's not like God would say, okay, right, now Moshe, with Genesis 12:2, I got a zinger. I want you to put this in Genesis 12:2. Remember? Put it right there. And tells him, no, that didn't happen. That's not the version of the
Yeah,
Torah. I'll tell
yeah,
you what the Torah looks like if you're curious, because I had an aliyah this weekend to the Torah, which is always nice. It's the Hebrew scriptures without any of the dots, but the words are kind of divided up, and you can read it from there.
yeah.
Um,
I have a interlinear Bible which has I guess the Hebrew for Old Testament with translation underneath, and
yeah, good.
then on the page next to it's got like the King James and or maybe NIV. I forget what.
You got to start reading it in Hebrew because those are, that's just so much work. It's so much work. It's more work to compare different translations to try to figure out what's going on than it's
Yeah,
just to learn the language.
yeah,
If you learn the language, you would know it anyway.
yeah.
That's just my advice. I mean,
I definitely probably would. It'd be nice to learn Hebrew. Start learning
Hebrew's a
what
lot
the
easier to
words
learn than
means,
English.
but learning a new language is so hard. I've tried
There's
doing it
a
a little
good
bit.
book. There's a good book written on Hebrew language, written by two ladies from Oxford, and I think it's just called Biblical Hebrew. And if you can, it used to be sold with a tape. But the best thing they do is they teach you how to break apart words, and so you can separate prefixes, suffixes, and the verb root, and then understand how those work. And that actually does a great job of showing you a lot of interesting things. And then
Yeah,
there's a dictionary called the Masculon. It's the Masculon dictionary, which is a blue one, and it has a listing of the verb roots. I'm not saying you have to go out and purchase it right now. I'm just letting people know that there are resources available. I
yeah,
think it's much better to understand the language. Otherwise, you have to believe in your heart that the person who translated that into English uh, did it faithfully and in such a way where you will never misunderstand what he wrote.
Yeah.
so that
Well,
it correctly reflects his theology.
yeah.
So
Yeah. He, well, there's the thing is too, it's translating it correctly, and sometimes it's hard to do that because the concept of a term isn't necessarily in a culture. Like,
yes, sure,
I heard about somebody translating. I think it was some like backwater tribe that in Africa or somewhere there. They didn't have a word for. I think it was faith. So
okay,
they set up this scenario of like what do you call somebody like holding a chair for you, like by holding it like on two legs, so you're tilted back, and what do you would call it that you have in that person that not to let go of the chair and let you fall backwards, hurt yourself. They
hmm
didn't have that concept, but so that using that concept to the people, they made that concept faith to them. So in their quote unquote Bible or Torah, it would faith would be this whole thing, holding the back of a chair while somebody's sitting in it and not letting go.
Well, based on some of the Africans I've known over my life, probably the reason I don't have a word for that is because they wouldn't do something so stupid as to lean on the back of their chairs and hope someone's going to catch them.
Yeah, or not,
They're very pragmatic. They're very pragmatic people, really.
that was just an example for faith. Like because faith is,
I know, I know.
yeah.
I'm being
I know
overly
you're a little
specific.
facetious, but it's just some
Yeah,
cultures
yeah,
don't have words for what other cultures have words for. And you've got to
yeah. Do you
put
think
the
somebody in the desert has a word for the snow or something?
yeah, you know, somebody is
Yeah, or somebody who's
white fluffy cold stuff.
whereas like Eskimos have like 24 or 25 different names for snow.
Yeah,
each each name representing kind. Well, it's just like here's an interesting one biblically. We have different types of sin in the Torah. We have different Jewish words. I mean, different types of sin, like intentional sin or accidental sin or whatever else.
yeah,
But in a lot of English translations, it's always just translated as sin. Well, the sin is important. Like, what kind of sin are we talking about? Because that really determines what you're supposed to do and the severity of it. Like, if somebody accidentally sins versus someone who is rebelliously sinning, that's a huge difference.
yeah. But yeah, because well, heck, I know I think it's in the Old Testament. It says rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft. So there's a
Yeah.
thing saying sort of different levels, or I'm not sure whether levels is the correct
Right.
word.
Well, the problem with witchcraft is witchcraft is always involves avodah which is like idolatry,
Yeah,
and it is a rebellious because
yeah,
having more than one god is a rebellion against God, and
yeah,
so that's what that represents.
yeah,
Witchcraft. That's why it's such a problem
yeah,
in in Torah.
yeah. But yeah, it's definitely you need to know. It's good to know the meaning of words, and like you said, sometimes it doesn't translate, or I guess I said doesn't translate quite correctly. So you get
Yeah,
another word, and people, and then unfortunately words change in different some meanings in different cultures, or even concepts. It's
yeah,
like the rainbow, what it's supposed to mean is God's promise, you know. Now it means a little something different, totally
yeah.
opposite than God.
Well, it represents God's promise, but you know what the promise represents?
The
It's a promise that God won't destroy the world, even though we deserve it.
yeah. Well, by flood the world. Well, as far as I know, won't
Flood the world, right? Flood the world. You're
to
right. You're
destroy
right.
the world by flood.
That's correct. Yes. But the point there is that when you see a rainbow, it's kind of like God is saying, I could, but I'm not going to.
Yeah,
You
but
you've given me reason to do something, but I'm not going to do it because I promised.
yeah, but unfortunately nowadays a rainbow sort of symbolizes something else. That symbol's been perverted, in my opinion.
I mean,
I
it's
don't want to get
unfortunate.
too. I don't
It's
want to
really,
get too much into it. I'm just trying to say that
well,
because of culture, things end up changing words, symbols.
but that was done on purpose.
Yeah, I
It's like
agree for that.
taking the rainbow as the symbol of the gay rights movement.
Yeah,
That was done on purpose. That's just kind of like spitting in your eye. I'm going to spit in your eye about this. Like
yeah,
that was like they couldn't have picked a better thing where but whatever.
yeah.
The colors of the rainbow also represent the seven mitzvot, the seven laws of Noah. Each color is representative of one of God's laws for all humanity, and so one of those laws is not to engage in forbidden unions, and
Oh,
that is
that's
that
interesting.
is the one that they do. Yeah. So
Yeah,
no, it's a big thing for sure.
yeah. So maybe
But
I should study.
it's not the
I
first
got
time.
the only problem with studying language is having somebody to talk with it in on an ongoing basis. I guess I could talk with you a
Well,
little bit
I'll tell
more.
you that. Well, for your purpose of if your purpose is to understand the Bible better, you don't really need to be able to say it well. You don't know how many Texans I've met who could not pronounce Hebrew to save their life. I'm pretty bad at it. I mean, everybody I get harassed with my accent all the time. My kids are embarrassed by me. They'll go, Abba, you have such a terrible accent. Can you please stop talking in Hebrew? Right? And the Israelis are like, uh, I speak English very well. And I'm like going, I'm just trying to speak in Hebrew. Let me speak in Hebrew. No, you're not very good at it. It's like, oh, come on, guys. I got to practice. So we all have our issues, right?
Yeah,
Just like someone expects you to speak French, right? We talked
yeah,
about this a few weeks ago, right? Your French would become like, parlez-vous not so good.
yeah.
But
I'm not good at
anyway,
French at all. I took it in
right,
school.
right.
I took it in school because I had to, and now I might know a
So
few
the
words. Bonjour.
right.
And
So my point
and
is,
I
is
can
that
count. I can count a little bit.
well, it's good. I can too. Uno, dos, tres, cuatro, cinco, cinco, seis. Next from a song, actually. And I know that SOCKS means that's what it is because of those commercials when I was a kid. How do you say it in Spanish? That's how it is. SOCKS. Right? So it's a clever little thing. Anyway. Well, I can feel my inner John cubes are running low. I probably need to get going. And
Okay. Before you go, you want to share anything, promote anything?
uh, yeah, I guess so. Yeah, you can find me at newherocomics.com. And if you go there to the product page, you'll find our store or whatever. You'll find all sorts of little goodies that you can get to support New Hero Comics, such as coloring books. We've got the Jewish coloring books and the non-Jewish coloring books, and we've got heroes who are Jewish and heroes who aren't Jewish. Two different coloring books. We've got Inner World number one. There's a novel I'm writing on, and you can get those there. And you can even hire me to draw a picture for you, as long as it's not from DC and Marvel and not inappropriate.
Yeah.
So that's it.
Uh-huh. So, and I'll give my goodbye in my little thing of my outro. So, just let me stop that. Hey, thanks for tuning in. Hopefully, you watched that all the way through. Hopefully, you got some information. It's sometimes it can be a lot to take in. All everything that's being said. And if you have any questions or comments, be sure to leave them in the the comment section to let us know, and we'll do the best that we can do to answer any. And again, thank you for watching, and I hope you really got some enjoyment out of that. And remember to like, share, and subscribe if you're not subscribed. And ring the bell for notification, letting you know when I'm putting stuff up anyways here on Cross Comics of either spiritual significance or, just drawing stuff. So we'll catch you later. Bye for now. God bless. Love you all.